Billionaire CEO demands the real genius behind the project. You won't believe who stepped forward. Ryan Carter stared at the sleek, illuminated screen, the words echoing in his mind like a drumbeat. Billionaire CEO demands. It was meant to be a celebration, a recognition of the jaw-dropping technology they had crafted. But now it felt more like a noose tightening around his neck. The project that had consumed his life, fueled by long nights and the invaluable mentorship of Mr. Jameson, his janitorial sage, now bore the brunt of suspicion. Whispers filled the comfortable yet suffocating conference room. Is he really the one? The talentless townie from Ohio? The clamor made his skin crawl, anxiety coiling like a snake in his gut. As the buzz swelled, kindness evaporated into competition. The very team he had led, his friends, his colleagues, were casting furtive glances, betraying an unsettling mix of jealousy and disbelief. Every feigned smile felt like a betrayal, an accusation hidden behind polite facades, feeding into his growing unease. He could almost hear their thoughts. Who was he to take the spotlight? A project manager who rose up from a modest town, clutching at success and claiming brilliance. Ryan's mind raced between ambition and dread, caught in the crossfire of his values and their doubt. The stakes intensified when an unexpected revelation pierced through his reality, shattering the little clarity he had left. Out of nowhere, Ryan learned that the technological foundation of the project was built upon the forgotten genius of his estranged father, the same man whose dreams had flickered out in obscurity, whose spirit had become a lost echo beneath societal disdain. The irony gnawed at him. Who was he to bask in the glory of an invention that his father conceived? The weight of this legacy pressed down like lead, suffocating him. What did it mean to be a son of an inventor who was once hailed a genius, only to become a relic of ruined prospects? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His stomach churned as he contemplated his next move. A gnawing fear of exposing his father's involvement loomed over him, enclosing him in a chamber of isolation and skepticism. At the same time, he couldn't bear the thought of stepping on Mr. Jameson's honor. This man who had seen potential in Ryan when all others had dismissed him as just another kid from a small town. To claim the glory alone felt like a betrayal, a transaction of integrity for mere accolades. The tension hung heavy in the air, a palpable force pressing on Ryan's chest as he stood in the brightly lit conference room, surrounded by eyes that burned with expectation. With the declaration of a groundbreaking reward looming like an electric storm, Ryan felt the battle within him rage like wildfire. Loyalty, idealism, and ambition twisted together, a muddled kaleidoscope of guilt and desire. He fought against the tide of impending decisions, but even as he wrestled with his anxiety, he envisioned the ramifications of his silence. Every unwelcome thought looped back to one piercing question. Was he willing to betray his own moral compass for success? The moment of truth beckoned, and the faces of everyone he had grown fond of loomed like specters demanding accountability. What he chose next could either obliterate or redeem his fragile sense of self. The crowd was boiling over with impatience, pulses racing, breaths held tight as Ryan edged closer to a precipice, his decision swirling around him like a tempest, threatening to engulf him whole. Would he have the strength to stand tall, to reclaim not just his own voice, but a legacy that belonged to others? Or would he crumble under the crushing weight of selfish ambition? In that fraught silence, only one thing was certain. The truth pressed upon him, relentless, a force that could never be ignored. Ryan's heart drummed in counterpoint to the uneasy murmurings of his colleagues. The weight of their scrutiny clawed at him, but within its crushing embrace, he found a flicker of resolve. This was not just about the project or their envy. It was about the hard-earned lessons and values he had etched into his being by the struggles of family and personal history. The tempest inside him began to calm, shifting from trepidation to clarity. He shifted his gaze from the screen to his team, dissecting each face in search of understanding, a connection lost in the fray of ambition and equal parts longing. There was Emma, the coder whose laughter once filled the break room, now narrowed into a judgment of who deserved the spotlight. To his right sat Alex, the strategist with whom he had shared countless brainstorming sessions, now reduced to a mere rival in this escalating game of ambition. Each expression felt like an accusation, yet also a reminder of what had once been, an unwavering bond over shared goals. What struck him was not their envy, but his own stark realization. He was so much more than a townie. He possessed a unique vision, a drive that had fueled his rise amidst doubt and hardship. Ryan had not merely inherited his father's regret. He had transformed it into fuel for his own aspiration. And though his father may have been a ghostly memory of failure, Ryan yearned to redefine that legacy. He would reclaim his father's brilliance, not as an act of betrayal, but as a tribute to the unfulfilled potential of a man who had weathered the storms of his time. The decision loomed large on the horizon, its implications cascading through Ryan's thoughts. It was clear he couldn't step forward with half-truths, cloaked in a veil of pride and fear. As he extracted himself from the depths of his internal struggle, clarity emerged. He needed to honor his father's contributions while acknowledging his own. A rising phoenix could not lay claim to its rebirth without reckoning with its roots. In that charged moment, a decision crystallized. Ryan stepped forward and raised his voice above the din of whispered doubts and skepticism. "I have to be honest," he said, voice steady yet tinged with the vulnerability that echoed within him. "The foundation of this project was built not just by me but by my father, whose brilliance has been overlooked for too long. He deserves to be recognized." The words spilled forth, and with them came a ripple of gasps from the audience, disbelief and intrigue intertwining. As he laid bare the truth of his heritage, Ryan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The act of vulnerability transformed into a powerful statement, a reclaiming of not only his father's rightful place, but also of his own. He caught the hesitation in Emma's eyes shift toward respect, the doubt that clouded Alex's features dissipating. For the first time, he could sense a shift, a tentative understanding of not just who he was, but the depth of his journey. But there was no denying the crucible still awaited. He had shed the mantle of selfish ambition, but the real test was yet to come from the very man whose approval had sparked this uprising, the billionaire CEO. What would be his reaction to this candid revelation? Would he embrace the accountability and the story that had fueled this audacious project? Or would he reject Ryan for unveiling a truth that cut against the grain of corporate interests? The conference room fell into silence, the air thick with anticipation as Ryan held his breath, bracing for the verdict that could shape the course of his career. Life, it seemed, had a way of unfolding beyond comprehension, bearing consequences Ryan had yet to imagine. As the CEO leaned forward to address the room, Ryan steeled himself for the moment that would define not just his future, but the legacy he sought to reclaim. Would this be the moment he defined himself, or would he face the consequences of his revelation? The CEO's gaze swept the room like a hawk surveying its territory. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, stretching into a tautness that threatened to snap. Ryan felt the collective breath of his colleagues catch in their throats. He could practically hear their thoughts racing. Could he really stand by his words? He had gambled so much, casting aside caution for an uncertain stake in legacy and recognition. "Ryan," the CEO's voice broke through the stillness, rich with authority yet laced with curiosity. "You stand before us claiming a legacy that's not entirely yours. Tell me, what makes this a project worth fighting for?" The question hung like a challenge in the air. All eyes remained locked on Ryan, a crescendo of expectations radiating from their expressions. The respect he'd glimpsed a moment ago transformed into an audit of his wholesale honesty. He felt exposed yet determined. This was not just a test of his narrative but also a crucible of integrity, and he knew he had to navigate it carefully. In that moment, a surge of adrenaline surged through him. Stepping into the limelight, he continued, What gives this project meaning isn't just my vision. It's the vision my father had long before I did. His ideas resonate in every line of code, every strategic plan, every risk we've taken. Understanding the root of our innovation can only enrich what we're trying to achieve. If we fail to recognize this, we risk losing sight of why we started at all. He watched the CEO's brows raise slightly. Curiosity piqued. For a moment, just one fleeting moment, Ryan believed he might have stirred something in the man. A spark of admiration, perhaps, for simplicity in a world that often butchered sincerity for slickness. Then reality crashed back down. The CEO leaned back, eyes narrowing, skepticism creeping back in. That's a bold claim. But where's your proof, Ryan? How do I know these ideas will hold the weight of the company's reputation? Ryan's heart raced again, his mind whipping back through his ideas and their origins, recalling late-night discussions and dreams shared over cups of coffee with his father. It wasn't simply about evidence. It was about honoring a legacy bent by erasure. A small fire ignited in his chest, molding his determination into focus. I know it's a gamble to place my father at the forefront, he admitted, choosing vulnerability as a tool rather than a weakness. But isn't it time we acknowledge contributions that have been hidden in the shadows? Innovation thrives on foundations built by those who came before us. It deserves to be recognized. It's what makes us genuinely human in a system driven by numbers. The room buzzed quietly, punctuated by whispers and exchanged glances. In championing his father's absence, Ryan was inadvertently highlighting his own vulnerability and uncertainty. He realized this was a double-edged sword, but he was ready to wield it. As murmurs built up, the CEO remained contemplative, weighing the momentum against his big-picture agenda. Ryan felt himself caught in an exhilarating tension, the pendulum of fate swinging in his favor. This wasn't just a moment for his father's legacy, but for his own reclamation of self. Then the CEO's voice broke the spell once again. You're saying we must not only look at innovation but also at the intention behind it? Yes, Ryan replied, locking eyes with him. The intention is what guides our innovation into the realm of authenticity. It must resonate with who we are as a company and where we're going. If we ignore that, we float aimlessly in a sea of competition. The CEO tapped the table thoughtfully, weighing Ryan's words against his expectations. The atmosphere thickened with tension, each second stretching into a small eternity. Ryan felt the weight of a singular gaze shift, the irony of legacy intertwining with ambition writ large. Would the waves of doubt break on the shores of understanding, or would they cripple his resolve? As the CEO leaned back to consider, an unmistakable challenge lurked beneath the surface, a gritty warning threading through Ryan's thoughts. This had only just begun. Would he win the respect he'd sought while risking everything to bring truth to the forefront, or would it all come crashing down around him? The next moment could change the course of his career, or it could seal the fate of another forgotten legacy. Ryan prepared himself. Clarity surged within him, shaping a determination he had only recently found. Am I right in thinking that the personal stakes escalate with our ambitions? Ryan murmured quietly as the room waited, rapt for the CEO's response. The journey of reclaiming legacies, after all, was bound to be fraught with peril. But Ryan's resolve was stronger than ever. Now, the fissures of truth might demand an even bolder step forward. Would he step up to the challenge or retreat into the shadows? The tension in the room crested like a wave, ready to crash. The CEO leaned forward, his piercing eyes fixated on Ryan, searching for signs of hesitation. There was vulnerability in Ryan's stance, his heart racing, each pulse a drumbeat of uncertainty. Yet within that vulnerability, a deepening sense of purpose radiated. He felt the heat of the spotlight, scorching and illuminating, revealing every corner of his psyche that he had fought so hard to shield. I don't believe in half measures, the CEO finally said, his voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel. And if your father's legacy is your guiding light, then show me the way it can lead this company forward. What capabilities do you possess to turn nostalgia into profit? This was it. The moment Ryan had been preparing for, yet each word from the CEO felt like a challenge etched in stone. He could either shrink back into the shadow of personal attachment or rise, harnessing that same legacy to fuel his ambition. A gust of self-doubt attempted to choke him, but he surged against it, determined not to drown in the undercurrent. "I possess a vision," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt within. "But beyond that, I have a unique understanding of our market dynamics. I've analyzed trends, built relationships with our clients, and immersed myself in every aspect of our company operations. I know where our strengths lie, and more importantly, where we falter. I propose to implement strategies that align our historical legacy with modern innovation." The murmurs of his colleagues had morphed from skepticism into respect, and for the first time Ryan sensed a shift in their perception. He was no longer merely speaking on behalf of a legacy. He was positioning himself as a catalyst for change. The CEO did not flinch. "But how do you plan to communicate this to the board? They won't easily accept some emotional appeal rooted in family sentiment." A knot formed in Ryan's stomach, recalling countless instances of overlooking the power of emotional intelligence in favor of data alone. "I plan to integrate a comprehensive narrative into our pitches that aligns economic incentives with the values my father stood for. Each data point will express not just numbers but the stories behind them, the heart of the company. Our potential investors deserve a sense of purpose along with profitability." Ryan's words hung in the air, leaving the CEO contemplative. For a moment, silence ruled once more, as if the room itself was evaluating the weight of Ryan's propositions. He could almost feel shifts in the air, the belief he sowed breaking through the initial skepticism. "All right, Ryan," the CEO finally said, straightening in his chair, a glimmer of interest in his otherwise guarded expression. "Let's put your theory to the test. You have 1 month. Showcase your idea and assemble a proposal fitting for our key stakeholders. You'll be alone in this. If you fail, the consequences will be yours to bear." His heart raced. This was a double-edged opportunity. Failure would mean exiting the precarious perch he had just climbed to, but success could unearth truths well beyond his father's legacy, his own abilities. "I won't let you down," Ryan replied, feeling the resurgence of confidence swell beneath the surface, ready to break free. After the meeting, uncertainty hung over him still, the weight of the grave responsibility casting a new shadow. Would he be able to pull this off, and, more importantly, would he discover aspects of himself he had not yet unlocked? With renewed focus, he retreated to his office, kneading his anxieties into determination. The undertaking before him required more than just ambition. It called for a relentless quest for authenticity and connection within a corporate behemoth that risked losing its humanity in a sea of data. Another layer of pressure settled as he sat in front of his computer, staring at the blank screen. The cursor blinked mockingly, awaiting words that felt monumental. But what he didn't know about himself was about to surface. Shaking his head to clear his hesitations, he set to work. As innovation clashed with legacy in his mind, a sudden idea sparked, an avenue he had overlooked amidst the chaos of his thoughts. Would he delve deeper into this idea of blending his father's influence with data-driven strategies, or dare to challenge the status quo even further? The answer lingered, just out of reach, teasing moments of discovery waiting to unfold. As Ryan pondered those critical questions, temptation whispered, urging him to explore this newfound path regardless of the risk it unfolded. What additional truth lay hidden in his father's teachings, and how might it shape Ryan's journey forward? Ryan's fingers hovered above the keyboard, weighing options that could either elevate him or plunge him into the murky depths of failure. Every keystroke felt like a commitment to the intricate dance between his father's legacy and the hard-edged demands of modern business. Thoughts spiraled through his mind. Could his father's principles withstand the rigors of today's market? Would passion sway those who craved only profits? His office was a sanctuary now, a brief refuge from corporate pressures, but time was ticking. He crafted bullet points on a notepad, ideas vying for dominance, legacy and innovation, emotional storytelling, data-driven insights, each concept swirling like eddies in a stream, waiting for him to harness their potential. He questioned every choice, mindful of the impending deadline. Outside his office door, the rhythms of work continued unabated. Conversations spilled into the corridor, punctuated by laughter and the occasional eureka moment. He could hear snippets of his colleagues discussing market growth, client retention strategies, and the latest industry trends. But amid the bustling energy, Ryan felt more alone than ever. This wasn't just about presenting an idea, it was about his transformation, stepping into a role that carried the weight of legacy. He leaned back in his chair, the soft creak echoing his internal struggle. The proposal was becoming more complex, and with that complexity came a familiar sensation of doubt. Would his father be proud of him for blending nostalgia with cold statistics, or would he be disappointed that Ryan leaned too heavily on the emotional resonance, turning it into mere sentimentality? Exhaling slowly, Ryan allowed the memories of his father's voice to guide him, echoes of advice wrapped in warmth, a reminder of connections forged through shared experiences. His father had excelled by building relationships, understanding the human aspect of business. The briefings, the deals, the late-night brainstorming sessions, all rooted in narratives that resonated deeply with people. It dawned on him, the key wasn't choosing one path over the other, but rather crafting a narrative that embraced both. He would present numbers, but also weave the story behind those numbers, showing investors not just the potential for profit, but the emotional investment that had built the company. He envisioned a presentation that left the board not just informed but inspired, a tapestry of innovation, legacy, and shared dreams that transcended mere fiscal reports. Fueled by newfound clarity, Ryan opened a document file. Each bullet point shifted into detailed paragraphs as he pored over questions that were both strategic and deeply personal. What did his father stand for? How could those values translate into a compelling vision for the future? As the sun began to set, casting golden rays across his desk, Ryan felt a shift deep within, tapping into strengths he hadn't previously acknowledged. Hours turned into a blur of creativity and focus. The tentative outlines solidified into a coherent structure, and he began to see the genesis of a proposal that could intertwine his father's beliefs with innovative strategies. But just as momentum surged, a flicker of apprehension twisted in his gut. He remembered the CEO's ultimatum, a reminder that the stakes were higher than just his father's legacy. It was about his own identity within the company and the business world at large. Each keystroke now carried the consequence of a decision that could redefine him, not just as a son, but as an executive. Then, confronting this critical juncture, he paused, reflecting on his motivations. Was he genuinely aligned with the vision he was crafting? Or was he navigating a path already mapped out by his father? A gnawing question whirred in his mind, beckoning him to dig deeper. What if the call to innovate meant diverging from his father's teachings in ways he hadn't yet considered? A storm of thoughts crashed into him, and as he contended with those unanswered questions, a small voice urged him to confront the truth. Perhaps his father's legacy wasn't a burden to uphold, but a foundation upon which he could build something uniquely his own. The drive to honor and yet evolve the past propelled him onward, and as he prepared to integrate these revelations into his work, a new opportunity for self-discovery shimmered ahead, one that might challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. A chill ran through him. The edge of a fresh confrontation loomed on the horizon. Would he embrace the challenge, risking everything to forge his identity in the crucible of corporate change, or would he retreat to the safer echoes of the past? The undeniable moment approached. He needed to decide. As the office lights dimmed slightly, Ryan sat still, the glow of his screen the only illumination in the tense atmosphere thick with uncertainty. He felt the weight of his own ambition pressing down on him, stifling yet igniting a deep set of determination. Each idea he had so carefully curated now resonated with the gravity of that ultimatum. He needed to present something remarkable, or risk losing not only his position, but also his chance to honor his father's legacy. The deadline loomed like a specter, and Ryan could feel the urgency pulsing in his veins, each heartbeat echoing the stakes. Summoning the courage to step beyond the conventions that defined him, he pondered whether it was time to reshape not just a proposal, but his entire narrative within the business landscape. Was he truly ready to assert his voice over the one that had long echoed in his father's absence? The very essence of what his father represented began to feel less like an anchor weighing him down, and more like the scaffolding that could support the structure he envisioned, one that could withstand the test of modernity while paying homage to tradition. The internal resistance he faced morphed into a question of identity, and for the first time, he considered what success would look like on his terms. Steeling himself, he opened a fresh document, a blank canvas awaiting the strokes of his newfound insights. The words flowed like water breaking through a dam, insights transforming into a cohesive narrative. He wrote about innovation driven by emotion, statistics supported by stories, charts complemented by testimonials. It wasn't merely about hard data. It was about forging connections in a disconnected marketplace. Yet, with every sentence he crafted in fervor, doubts snaked back into his mind like creeping vines. Each paragraph glimmered with potential, yet he found himself haunted by worries of being dismissed as inexperienced, or worse, as merely riding on his father's coattails. The fear of being seen as a hollow successor churned inside him, compelling him to stand stronger in his own resolve. Suddenly there was a knock at the door, jolting him from his reverie. It was Mia, one of his colleagues, her expression a delicate balance of concern and curiosity. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she began, stepping into the office. Ryan could feel her warm presence, a hint of camaraderie amidst the isolation he had been grappling with. He paused, searching for words, and then he decided to share. "I'm working on my proposal for Friday's meeting. It feels like everything is on the line." Mia stepped closer, her eyes flickering with encouragement. "You've got this, Ryan. You're not just delivering your father's vision, you're adding your own perspective. That's powerful." Her belief in him wrapped around the insecurities like a lifeline. Her words ignited an ember in Ryan's chest. "But what if it's not enough?" he whispered, the vulnerability escaping before he could harness it. "Then you learn from it," she replied, unwavering. "Every great leader faces those fears. It's how you respond that shapes your path." As though a curtain lifted, Ryan felt a breakthrough. He wasn't merely defending legacy, he was adapting it, creating a new legacy that belonged to him. This twist, a surge of self-trust, mattered most. His array of ideas began to materialize not as separate strands but as a rich tapestry interwoven with his voice. With renewed fervor, Ryan turned back to the pulsating screen, the cursor blinking with expectation. This was not just about meeting a deadline, it was a chance to stake his place. But in the midst of clarity, a sudden thought prickled through him, a realization that loomed larger than the proposal itself. Another stark truth emerged in the shadows. The CEO's demand for the real genius hinted at an undercurrent. Did that genius need to be him? That potential confrontation hanged in the air, heavy and electric. The notion twisted in his gut, a stark reminder that amidst the promise of self-discovery lay the possibility of vulnerability and exposure. Ryan's heart raced as he prepared for the real challenge ahead. Would he boldly claim that genius, or would he falter under the pressure of expectation? The moment to decide was at hand, and it arrived earlier than he anticipated. The fluorescent lights of the office flickered back to life, pulling Ryan from a trance that enveloped him in thoughts more profound than the mere words on his screen. Each pulse of the cursor felt deliberate, almost taunting, as if it were an echo of his own misgivings. He grappled with the weight of expectation. The very notion of genius stretched before him like the yawning chasm of a cliff. That afternoon he decided to venture outside his familiar realm. He grabbed a notepad, scribbling hastily, intending to gather his thoughts in a different setting, somewhere less suffocating than the confines of the office. Stepping into the bustle of the cafe a few blocks away, he found a corner table. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee lifted his spirits momentarily, but the underlying anxiety remained, seeping through the cracks of his composure. With the coffee in hand, Ryan leaned over the notepad. He wrote the words "real genius" at the top, underlined vigorously, and began breaking down what that meant to him. Did it mean validation, authority, or was it a call to embrace an identity that felt foreign yet crucial? As he scribbled, the world around him faded. The clatter of mugs, the chatter of patrons, all of it became a distant hum. He paused, tapping the pen against the paper, grappling with unsettling thoughts. The pressure to be more than just a legacy resident loomed ominously. What would happen if he failed? With each of these doubts resurfacing, he felt gripped by an urge, no, a necessity, to confront the shadows that chased him. He recalled Mia's words, ruminating on the concept of learning through failure. What was the risk of vindicating his doubts rather than dismissing them? The revelation dawned on him. The emotional component that had once felt like an anchor now began to reveal itself as a powerful tool. Incorporating his own understanding of emotional intelligence into his proposal could set him apart. This necessary vulnerability, still difficult to unwrap, was part of the genius he sought to embody. He began drafting ideas, each one more raw and personal than the last. A narrative emerged, not just reflecting numbers and strategies, but speaking to the human experience, to the stories behind every deal, every handshake. He imagined his father's voice alongside his own, a duet of legacies, but one in which his own notes were rising to the surface. After hours of revision, he felt the distinct prick of alignment. The statements flowed as they captured his vision authentically. But alongside this surge of confidence, the question persisted. Was he wielding his genuine voice? Or was he still just a reflection of someone else's brilliance? It was a tightrope walk between authenticity and expectation, and the tension was palpable. Just then, his phone buzzed furiously, breaking his concentration. It was an invitation to a last-minute meeting with the CEO to discuss proposals. A breath caught in his throat as the implications swirled through him like a tempest. This wasn't merely a chance to share his ideas. It was an encounter that could solidify his presence within the company or shatter the ground beneath him. As he stood, determination surged through him like a current. Standing could mean more than just physical elevation. It could redefine who he was becoming. But would he be ready to own it when he would face the very question of genius? The time had come to confront the looming acknowledgement that this path required more than intellect. It demanded conviction, identity, and an unwavering belief in his journey. Clutching the notepad tightly, Ryan felt a flame igniting within him. With every step toward the office, he recognized the impending truth. The notion of genius would not be gifted upon him. He had to claim it. He had to demand it for himself. The air hung heavy with anticipation as he entered the elevator, and with every second that ticked by, he felt the pressure mount. This was it. The moment where he would discover whether the real genius behind the project had truly emerged, or if the fear of being overshadowed would strip away his potential. Stepping into the conference room, Ryan's heart quickened as he faced the imposing figure of the CEO, Mr. Wallace, an embodiment of power and authority. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view, but it did little to alleviate the sense of vulnerability that enveloped him. The room, richly decorated yet eerily sterile, became a crucible where his self-worth would be tested. He often admired Mr. Wallace from afar. Now, as he secured a seat opposite him, the opportunity felt colossal, yet terrifying. "Ryan," Mr. Wallace began, his voice smooth yet commanding, "I've heard whispers of a unique perspective that you've developed for the upcoming project. I want to know what the real genius of this proposal is." The gravity of the words weighed differently now. They were an invitation and, simultaneously, a challenge. With a deep breath, Ryan structured his thoughts, aligning them with the lessons he had internalized over the past days. He noticed Mr. Wallace's penetrating gaze. It searched for authenticity, a trace of the genius he so openly demanded. The moment felt pivotal, compelling Ryan not just to present ideas but to unveil his evolving identity. "Thank you for this opportunity," he began, gripping the notepad tighter, feeling its weight anchor him amidst the uncertainty. "What I envision goes beyond profits and clients. It's about transforming how we perceive collaboration." He pushed past the initial stammering and articulated his vision with clarity. The words flowed around stories and human connections, echoing his earlier reflections. He detailed how understanding emotions, fostering meaningful relationships, could turn a simple proposal into a transformative movement. Each sentence was meticulously crafted, yet there were moments of raw honesty woven in, revealing personal stakes intertwined with professional ambitions. Yet, even as he spoke, Doubts shadowed his mind. Was he straying too far from the formulaic approach that had become the norm? His voice held steady, but internally, he grappled with the apprehension that his vulnerability might be perceived as weakness. Mr. Wallace tilted his head slightly, a flicker of intrigue evident in his demeanor. Interesting approach, but can you back this up with numbers? With results? The query sent shockwaves through Ryan. The push for quantitative evidence felt like an erasure of the message he had strived to craft. As he scanned the conference room, he realized the struggle that lay ahead, the challenge of merging emotional intelligence with corporate pragmatism. This was where he would ultimately carve out his identity, by balancing both worlds. While numbers are crucial, Ryan replied, immediately recalibrating his focus, the underlying narratives are what make them resonate. I believe it's these narratives that will foster trust and loyalty in our clients. A moment of silence enveloped them, and Ryan noticed the CEO contemplating his words. The temperature in the room shifted, tension razor-thin as both men navigated the labyrinth of expectations. Trust is built on stories, Ryan, Mr. Wallace finally responded, a glimmer of respect breaking through his hardened exterior. You may just have something here, but you will need to fully commit. Are you ready to embrace the repercussions of being different? The weight of his question sank in. The notion of devoting oneself to a path that diverged from conventional strategies brought forth a whirlwind of anxiety mixed with exhilaration. Transformation required risk, a gamble Ryan had yet to fully embrace, but the flickers of newfound conviction ignited beneath the surface. Yet, beneath this newfound sense of possibility, dread still lingered. The stakes were too high. The fear of disappointing those who expected greatness from him still loomed ominously. As the meeting concluded, Ryan felt a mix of exhilaration and dread racing through him. The acknowledgement of potential was merely the beginning. What remained unclear was whether he could step up fully to the plate or allow the expectations to seep back in, stifling his emerging voice. With Mr. Wallace's parting words resonating in his mind. Embrace the repercussions. Ryan stepped back into the hallway, a transformative urge compelling him to reclaim his essence. But a question lingered uncomfortably. Would he seize the moment fully or retreat into the shadows of insecurity? The crossroads lay before him, and he would have to decide soon. What sacrifices would he be willing to make for the sake of authenticity? The path of real genius demanded choices that would irrevocably shape his future, a future still clouded in uncertainty. Ryan left the conference room, his mind racing, caught in a whirlwind of thoughts about his presentation and the unexpected affirmation he had received from Mr. Wallace. The mixture of exhilaration and anxiety pulsated through him. He felt exposed, but the challenge had nudged him toward a new trajectory. He wandered down the sleek hallway, each step echoing his uncertainty. The voices of his colleagues faded into the background, drowned out by the tumult of his inner dialogue. What had started as a clear vision had morphed into an unsettling quandary. Would his unique approach hold up under scrutiny? Was it too ambitious for a context that typically favored numbers over narratives? His gaze settled on a glass wall displaying a vibrant team working diligently. He saw their heads bent over papers, exchanging ideas, and felt a pang of isolation. He envied their camaraderie, their steadfastness in following the established rules. His methods could shake the very foundation of their lives. Would they fear him for it? He hesitated, envisioning backlash, a fate he wasn't ready to face. Just then, Sarah, a respected colleague known for her grounded approach, approached him, breaking through his reverie. "Hey, Ryan, that was quite a pitch in there. What are you working on next?" Her enthusiasm should have buoyed him, but instead it ignited a flicker of defensiveness. "Just refining ideas, I guess. Trying to square emotional narratives with the corporate mindset." She raised an eyebrow, a mixture of concern and curiosity etched on her face. "That's quite a balancing act. You think they'll appreciate that?" "Honestly, I don't know." The admission slipped out before he could filter it. Her expression softened, prompting him to elaborate. "Mr. Wallace likes results, tangible outcomes, and I'm not sure the story angle is enough." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I get it, but remember, stories are easier to sell. If you can weave in the numbers, it could transform your whole proposal. The conversation struck a chord. He realized he hadn't fully committed to the emotional intelligence he espoused. He was still tethering himself to old paradigms. He needed to embrace the delicate interplay between quantitative results and qualitative narratives. Right. So it's not about choosing one over the other. It's about how to effectively intertwine them. Exactly. The rush of insight flushed over him like a cool tide. The duality of his approach became a tool rather than a hindrance. But as he departed from the conversation, a sense of urgency mingled with his earlier dread. The thought of crafting this proposal weighed heavily upon him. Dare he disrupt the norm? Would embracing a more holistic approach fortify his standing or further isolate him? He returned to his desk, knowing the challenge ahead held far more than metrics. It was a reclamation of his identity. As he analyzed his proposal, he focused on integrating data points with stories of triumph and vulnerability from past projects. Real circumstances and challenges humanized the outcomes. The numbers alone had never made the impact he hoped. With each stroke of his pen, Ryan envisioned a balance between heart and statistics, an infusion of authentic intentions within the traditionally rigorous framework. The tightness in his chest eased, replaced with a sharp clarity. Yet, as the day progressed and he immersed himself in the modifying drafts, a thread of doubt lingered. Would the blend of narrative sophistication withstand the harsh gaze of the board? As he glanced out the window, the city skyline silhouetted against the orange glow of dusk. He recognized this as his turning point. If he could articulate his vision with precision, proving that vulnerability might hold the key to corporate success, he might just rewrite his professional narrative. Determination surged through him. He would not retreat. But the prospect of sharing such a daring vision with Mr. Wallace again brought forth the question. Was he ready to confront the defenses of an established regime and risk it all for authenticity? Emboldened, Ryan burst into action, the shadows of doubt pushing against his resolve. This newly forged path demanded not just intellect, but courage, a blend he had yet to master. With time running thin before the next presentation, he questioned whether he could summon the conviction needed to navigate the shaky terrain of corporate expectations. The fear of failure whispered in his ear, but the allure of potential transformation beckoned him forward, demanding an answer to a looming challenge. The moment of truth approached, and Ryan had to wrestle with the prospect of stepping into an arena where both appreciation and vulnerability converged. What awaited him in that room? And more crucially, what personal sacrifices would he have to make in his pursuit of truth? Ryan stood in front of the polished conference room table, the flickering lights overhead reflecting the turmoil swirling within him. He reviewed his notes meticulously. Each bullet point, each crafted phrase encapsulated not only the numbers, but the very essence of his father's legacy, the blend of emotional intelligence with cold, hard results. He had wrestled with this nebulous concept of genius, and now it was time to stake his claim. The previous weeks weighed heavily on him, but now he stood transformed. Gone was the anxious young man from the small town, uncertain of his worth. In his place stood a resolute professional ready to embrace vulnerability for the greater good of the team. He understood that to carry his father's legacy forward meant to craft his own identity within the framework of success. He was no longer just the townie. He was an innovator, a leader, someone who dared to intertwine personal narrative with corporate ambition. As the door swung open, Mr. Wallace entered, flanked by board members who settled into their chairs, their faces etched with curiosity and skepticism. Ryan felt the anticipation ripple through the room, yet something within him steadied his nerves. He was ready. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this chance to present my proposal," Ryan began, his voice resonating with confidence. The words flowed easily as he conveyed how harmonizing emotion with strategy could not only create connections, but also grant their technology a profound narrative, a story worth investing in. "I want to take you on a journey," he said, his tone steadying. "Innovation doesn't just thrive on numbers, it flourishes on the shared experiences that build trust. We have a unique opportunity to leverage the power of my father's vision while anchoring it in market realities." Ryan could feel the subtle shift in the room as he unveiled not only his proposal, but also a personal dimension. He wove anecdotes about late-night talks with his father, their shared dreams, and the relentless passion that had sparked innovation long before them. Each tale complemented statistical projections, demonstrating how emotional resonance could translate to financial success. As he concluded, he looked each board member in the eye, gauging their reactions. The air stood thick with introspection. He had taken a gamble, intertwining his vulnerability with his ideas, bearing more than just the evidence. He laid himself on the line. Mr. Wallace leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. "You've drawn quite a narrative, Ryan," he said, breaking the silence. "But you've also placed heavy emphasis on personal stakes. Convince me, why should we prioritize this ethos over pure profitability?" There it was, the moment to reclaim everything he had fought for. With steady resolve, he articulated how incorporating this ethos wasn't a departure, but an evolution. Our generation seeks more than just transactions. They want engagement. By connecting our innovations to a story, we create loyalty. We turn clients into advocates. This isn't just about our bottom line. It's about establishing a legacy worth standing behind. He could see the flickers of intrigue turn into nods among some board members. However, uncertainty still lurked on others' faces, especially Mr. Wallace. Would they truly embrace change? Would personal stories overshadow numbers? After a pregnant pause, Mr. Wallace finally spoke, his tone softened. "You may have just elevated your current narrative, Ryan. Prove to us that this isn't just passion, but a well-calibrated strategy." With his heart pounding, Ryan sensed that he had the CEO's attention. He prepared to delve into the data, his research and projections wrapped intimately around the stories he articulated. As the proposals unfolded, the balance started to feel palpable. The room shifted from skepticism toward elucidation. The meeting extended beyond the confines of numbers alone, framing discussions around how to curate an authentic voice that could bring unforeseen success to the company. Ryan felt a rush of exhilaration even amid scrutiny, the back and forth ebbing and flowing with familiarity he had cultivated within the confines of his modest upbringing. The presentation concluded, but the real victory lay not in resounding applause, but in the conversation that followed, an inviting discourse around merging innovation with emotion. Ryan watched as board members exchanged glances propelled by newfound respect, not just for him, but for the spirit behind the company. Days passed, and reflection settled in. Ryan often paced the office, now decorated with printed feedback and notes on his proposal that bore his name and signature insights. He still grappled privately with self-doubt seated in old habits, yet with each engagement he embraced, he felt an unwavering confidence cement itself in his core. He had achieved what once felt impossible, transforming the whispers of others into harmonious symphonies, sung in recognition of his father's influence and his own evolving brilliance. Finally, amidst the bustle of office life, Mr. Wallace invited Ryan into his office. "I want to acknowledge your remarkable proposal, Ryan. We're going to implement the ideas you've crafted." The words reverberated through him, not as a directive, but as validation. A small smile tugged at his lips as he stood. "Thank you, sir. I'm ready to dive into this." Ryan stepped into his future with solid confidence, knowing that he had conquered the shadows that once haunted him. His legacy was now one he could wear with pride, embracing the heart behind the numbers and ensuring that no one else's dreams, including his father's, would ever fade into obscurity again. He had achieved not just professional success, but personal growth that forever bridged past and future. In that moment, he realized that the quest wasn't simply about claiming genius, it was about living it fully, authentically, and with the knowledge that true brilliance arises from both legacy and the courage to redefine oneself. Now is your turn. If you found inspiration in Ryan's journey, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for stories that illustrate personal overcoming. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how resilience can lead to brilliance. Comment your thoughts on Ryan's transformation. Let's keep the conversation going.